Hey, computational thinking. It's Mr. Tennyson, and I'm here to give you some tips on the Pomodoro Timer project. That is one of your options for your final project for computational thinking. Before we go over the project itself, and I give you some hints on the code, I want to show you what the example of the final running timer should kind of look like. Compared to the call log evaluator project, the Pomodoro timer is a little more open-ended on how you present the code in the console. It's really up to you. The Pomodoro timer is more visually interesting, I guess, than call log evaluator, where we're really just looking to get some specific answers. But both projects have distinct challenges, so this is one area where you can be a little more creative. Let me just go ahead and show you what I've got here. So I'll run my code. It tells me I'm using the Pomodoro timer. I can enter W to start my Pomodoro timer, or I can press Q to quit. I'll go ahead and get started. So I'll say W, and then it will tell me I've started my Pomodoro timer, and it's going to ring at 0:35. While it's running, I want to point out that on Replit, because these servers run on UTC time, right now that is approximately 4 hours ahead of our EST time. Okay, so what that means is that it's 8:35 p.m. right now, but it's actually 12:35 in UTC. So that means we're going to see this on Replit. You might run into that, or you will run into that issue as well. The time is not going to match up. Don't fret about that too much. It doesn't really matter. But notice how I've got this timer running, and it's giving me some output. It's telling me that the time remaining is 0 minutes and 59 seconds. And I currently have my timer set to be a 1-minute timer. And it's showing me this every 15 seconds, with the exception of the first output here. It's showing me the timer is essentially started, and there are 59 seconds remaining. You can do this a number of different ways. You can have it look like a normal clock. You can have it state time remaining, blah, blah, blah. That's really up to you. I'm accomplishing this right here with modulo, and that's something that I've already mentioned in the assignment. And I'm accomplishing this right here with an if statement. Okay, so there's some if statements and modulo going on here that are helping me display the time in a, I guess, an organized way. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and look at the project, and I'll give you some tips. I need to open up a new Replit. That's from call log. This will be Pomodoro tips. And we'll open up the doc as well. 1 second. Let's see. Pomodoro timer. All right. Okay, so one reason I like this, or two reasons I really like this project. One is that it introduces you to the concept of a Pomodoro timer. And in fact, I show you a real world example right here, tomato timer. This is a really useful way of managing your time. If you think about it, how often do you really go 25 minutes without doing any other distracting tasks? I would wager that even if you're playing a video game or, I don't know, going for a walk, whatever it might be, you're still engaging in these distractions like looking at your phone or whatever it might be. But a Pomodoro timer, at least the philosophy of it states, you cannot do anything other than the task you set yourself to do for 25 minutes before you take a break. I would encourage you to just try this out on its own. Maybe try using it while you're working on this project. And you might find it pretty valuable to use in your everyday life, doing homework and things like that. The key is to adhere to not being distracted by literally anything during that 25 minutes. So that's what a Pomodoro timer is. And the other reason I like this project is because time is everywhere in applications, and being able to work with it effectively is really important. And building a timer is something that's totally reasonable for a programmer to do. I use a cool app when I'm cooking at home. It's called Time, It's spelled Thyme like the herb for cooking, but it basically has an oven, and on the oven there's 4 timers that represent the burners of the oven, and there's a timer for the oven itself, like the baking or broiling oven. And you can set them each to individual times, and I just think that's such a cool little app. It's very simple, but it's very handy, because where else can you get 4 labeled timers like that? I don't know. Real simple example, but very powerful and useful. And that's where programming shines the most. Anyway, so the requirements of this program are that you create something that will perform like a timer. Basically, you want to create a timer using this program. You shouldn't be using time.sleep. You should not use the time library, which is, you might use it for something, but it shouldn't be the main way you derive your timing. Your timing should come from the datetime library. Using the datetime library. And I'll clarify that here. I guess, did I include that anywhere? I think it's down here. It is. There we go. Yes, you got to use datetime. All right. The user should be able to start the timer from a simple menu. We saw that. Upon starting the timer, the program should display when the alarm will ring, so it should predict when the timer is going to go off. That's the first thing it should do to let them know. And then it should display the current time left on the clock. And as I said, you can be pretty flexible with how this shows up. A lot of you, once you get started with this, you're going to experience a situation where you're going to get like dozens of outputs of, 0 minutes or 10 minutes and 44 seconds remaining. You might see that show up like 40 times. And that's because the while loop is running many times per second. And it's going to display that string many times per second before you get to the next second, like 10:43, okay? Don't worry about that. If you're still getting that when you turn this in, I'm not going to give you grief over that at all. As long as your timer works correctly, I'm not going to be upset if you're still doing that. But there's ways to figure it out, including modulo and some other methods. Okay, the timer should stop when it is up, so make sure that works correctly. Some resources and hints. Like I said, the project's open-ended. You're definitely going to use datetime. You should probably have at least one while loop, and you might want to use some functions to organize your code. I also highly recommend that when you're working with datetime, you never use or avoid using strict equality. And I mean this right here. So you might say something like, if the current timer's time is equal to the time it should end, then I should do something. But the truth is, because of the microseconds attribute of a datetime object, it's very unlikely that current time will ever equal a preset time. And that's simply because as the while loop is running, right, it's not fast enough to hit the microseconds right on the dot. Like if we said 10 minutes from now, well, that's 10 minutes, but it's also like 10 minutes from whatever the microseconds of now are. Let's say the microseconds are 862,537, right? We would have to hit 10 minutes and 862,537 microseconds from now, if you get what I'm saying. Basically, the way to avoid that is use the greater than or equal to, less than, not equal to operators to make it work, right? Because you can use these with time, and just so I can show you real quick, I showed it in the other video, I'll do it here as well. So here's an example. If I set the time to now, and then I give a yesterday date time, right? And if I say now is less than yesterday, well, no, that's not true, because now is greater than, from a time perspective, now is greater than yesterday, and that would be true. Okay, so you can use this with time. Very handy. All right. A few extra adventures. A real Pomodoro timer, that is this one, includes breaks of 5 minutes and 10 minutes that automatically occur. So there are 4 5-minute breaks followed by a longer 10-minute break. And you can see I do short break, it's going to start counting down. If I do long break, it'll start counting from 10. Okay? See if you can figure out how to create something like that with your Pomodoro timer. And then try improving the visual output so it has that real timer look to it. Again, this will be a challenge, but you can use like time.sleep and maybe some string format time to help yourself there. Okay, let's talk about the Pomodoro Timer code. That was really loud, sorry. Big whatcha on the keyboard. All right. Sorry, I had to hide my screen there. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, obviously, is I'm going to need date time. So I'll be including date time as an import here. And then another thing I recommend is, you know, think about your timer, like the amount of time. You want to think about that as a time delta. So I would say, like, have a variable amount of time that is always a time delta, and you can set the minutes of that time delta to be anything you want. Now, oh yeah, we got to import time deltas. Perfect. Okay. So this is what's going to control the amount of time your timer is running. We can set that to anything. Okay. All right. So we'll just say 1 minute for now. All right. The next thing that I need to be aware of, and I'm just going to make some comments here. We're going to at least have a while loop for sure. And this is going to be the running timer. But you also need to be keeping track of these things. You need to keep track of the start time. That's probably going to be datetime.now. Okay. But you also want to keep track of the current time. Okay. And the end time. So these three concepts, where these three variables are in the code, really matters. Okay. This really matters. The way you organize these pieces of data, right? So the end time is going to always be, you know, the start time plus the amount of time. That's pretty simple. But current time, right? That also has to be, you know, that moment. But you've got to make that a separate concept from start time. Okay, you've got to make it a separate concept from start time, because if what you end up with is like start time being the same thing as current time, then you're going to be updating this end time constantly. That's what you really have to avoid. So I'll make a note here. Avoid updating end time every time the loop starts over. That's a big one for Pomodoro Timer. But all in all, this isn't too complex of a problem, and I think that you'll figure it out pretty quickly. Don't overcomplicate it too much. I've made it a little simpler since we're doing this NTI stuff by not including the breaks and everything. So I think this ends up being a little simpler that way. And, you know, get your display, like your time display, working the way that you want it to. That'll be entertaining as well. I wish you luck with this project. And again, if you've got any questions at any point about anything, you can message me on Slack, email, Classroom, phone, carrier pigeon, however you want to do it. And I'll be around between 8 and 10 p.m. every evening to answer those questions almost instantly as best I can. And if not, I'll get to that question in the evening if you ask me during the day. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for this one. Again, I wish you luck, and look forward to seeing your Pomodoro Timer submissions. Don't forget, use the Pomodoro Timer to enhance your productivity. All right, that's it.